And welcome to this segment of this week's Tom Green podcast. We talked about the Wolverines, we talked about the Tigers as much as we could. The Red Wings are about to get in action as well with some prospects up in Traverse City. But besides that, we're here to talk some Lions-Seahawks with KEZI's Cameron Derby. Cameron, pleasure to have you on the show, and glad that you got back to me when I reached out, and all is good in the world. So welcome to the show, Cam.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, anytime I get a chance to talk about Seahawks football, I'll show up running. Yeah, despite what happened last week with the Seattle Seahawks, it's gonna be fun. We got a good game in front of us with the Seahawks and Lions, so I'm excited to talk about that. And thanks for having me from all the way over there on the other side of the country. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and so you're a believer in they write me off, but I ain't right back. Is that what
Well,
you're?
it's funny because I'm a journalist at heart first, but I grew up as a diehard Seahawks fan. That was the team that I obsessed over as a kid. The first professional game ever that I went to, my dad took me to a Seahawks game. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. One of the last years that they played in the Kingdome before Lumen Field went up. So I was very excited about the throwback jerseys, as you can see on the wall back there. There's
Oh
there's a Tyler
yes.
Lockett sitting back there, but I was one of the people that was very, very upset that Russ had been let go. And I was I think I spent all of the last offseason just fretting and pouting and being a baby. And then Gino had one of the best years of, probably the best year of his entire life. And now I am 100% a Gino believer. I think it took me about 3 weeks to get on board, but I'm on board for life now.
So let's just double check. You do not do high knees in a plane. Is that the thing here?
When I board 5 a.m. flights, I'm usually one of the people that's like, just put your bag in the overhead bin, sit down, and go to sleep. That's what we're trying to do on the airplane. No, I have a special place in my heart for Russ. I'm not one of the people that has any sort of like, I just don't have any animosity towards him. He was my favorite player that I watched throughout my entirety of Seahawks football. I still got a jersey. It's hanging up over there. It's been retired from being worn until he comes back, but it is up, and I don't know if he'll ever come back. But he was one of my heroes growing up, and I think that the two sides just didn't work out with each other, and it was time to move on. It was either going to be a quarterback or a coach, and they had to choose, and here we are. So, wish him the best of luck over there in Denver.
Absolutely. So it was kind of lost what I was gonna have to say there. It happened. So anyway, moving to this Lions Seahawks preview last week. I mean, Detroit. We'll start with Detroit. I mean, I talked about it a lot on my show last week, but I'll give it to you straight, my friend. I mean, I did not expect this at all. That Detroit would go into Kansas City on championship banner lifting night and beat the Chiefs. I mean, they did not play their best game by any means. I mean, they had some trouble. They had some trouble with the pass, a little bit of trouble with the run, but they were able to do enough to win that game and stop Patrick Mahomes, who had to throw to, geez, let's see, probably about 10 different receivers. One of them might have been named Cameron Derby. The other one might have been named Tom Green. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was finding so many different receivers. It was crazy because Travis Kelce was out. And it has nothing to do, of course, with what's going on with Taylor Swift, which I will say that I am 1000% happy that this happened, because I've been in certain situations like that where, you get stiffed and you hope that something happens down the line. But thankfully with Travis Kelce, something did happen. But besides that, Detroit, of course, I go on a few different tangents on the show. Detroit didn't play their best game, but they beat the Chiefs, and the hype, I'm telling you, is real. How do you see the hype, and how do you see last week's game?
Yeah, it's interesting. I I'm upholding a promise that I made on TikTok. Last year, I begged and begged and begged the Lions to beat the Packers so that the Seahawks could make the playoffs. And Seattle didn't do anything with that playoff opportunity. But part of my promise was that if the Lions went on and beat the Packers, I would not say anything negative about the Lions in any public light for an entire year. So I am on the Lions train this season. I am upholding this promise. I predicted the Lions to beat the Chiefs in week one. I didn't predict it to go the way that it did. Um, I think this game was a lot more reflective of the Chiefs playing poorly in situational football than necessarily the Lions doing more to win. Now, at the end of the day, it's an NFL game, right? It's hard to win an NFL game. You have to do a lot of things good to win an NFL game. That being said, I think Tom and Cameron probably could have gone into that NFL game and caught a couple more of those passes than the Chiefs did. So, it's a
Especially
frustrating
Kadarius
night
Toney.
for, yeah. So frustrating night for Patrick Mahomes, but to go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs at home. I have always said this. I'll probably say it later when we're talking Lions, Seahawks against each other. I have such a hard time picking teams to go into another team's home stadium at the home opener and beat them, let alone the Super Bowl champions. Obviously, Travis Kelce helped out the situation a little bit by not being in the game, but the Lions hype is real. I mean, I can't imagine what that feels like over in Detroit. I can't remember any time in my life where the Lions have had this kind of attention, this kind of hype, this kind of prediction from the professional world to be a good division contending, playoff contending football team. And these two, by the way, the Seahawks and the Lions, they went at each other last year. So
Okay.
this should be an exciting game, especially with the disappointment that the Seahawks showed last week.
Excuse me. Oh yes, you got it. I mean, like I had been saying, they didn't play their best game, and the Chiefs made some critical errors that Detroit capitalized on. But adding to your point is that, geez, I've been watching this team since before the 0-16 season of 2008, and a lot of my younger years, you have this delusional, I guess, hype that you think that Detroit's a way better team than they actually were over the years, especially the Jim Schwartz years after the playoff year of 2010, I believe it was. And so it definitely it sort of feels unreal, to be honest. I kind of have the same feeling as when the Lions beat the Patriots in 2018 after Matt Patricia took over. It's like, wait a minute, that just happened. I mean, it's a great feeling, and I hope that this lasts throughout the year. And a lot of people are expecting it to last throughout the year. And so, what I have to say to a lot of Lions fans, including myself, is don't take it for granted. There's a lot of parity in the NFL. I mean, look at the Seahawks last year. I mean, they got rid of Russell Wilson in a trade. Nobody expected them to make the playoffs, but Geno Smith, like you said, played the year of his life and made the playoffs because of course, partially because the Lions beat the Packers in the last week, but the Seahawks beat the Lions, and that's kind of what we're going. Next point is that the Seahawks have had the Lions numbers since, geez, before the LOB. So, transitioning, talk about your Seahawks. I mean, that was a very disappointing loss to a Los Angeles Rams that half of them referred to Matthew Stafford as Sir before first week. I'm sure you've seen that report.
Yeah, your guys' old friend Matthew Stafford. And
Mm-hmm.
this is it's funny you bring up, the Lions always or the Seahawks have had the Lions number. The Rams have the Seahawks number. It doesn't matter. I was talking about this before the game. I was predicting Seattle to win just because I'm on board with the offense that Pete Carroll has put together this year. But the Lions, yeah, I was telling everybody, the Lions play the Seahawks tough. Every team has that divisional team that just doesn't seem to go away, no matter how good they are. I
Okay.
mean, John Wolford went crazy against the Seahawks one time. So the Rams are just that team for Seattle. And so I was saying, hey, this game is going to be close. And for whatever reason, and I'm not underselling Seattle's disappointment. I'll get to that in a second. But
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, to me, that makes no sense. The world slept on Matthew Stafford over this past offseason in a way that is just bizarre to me. This week
Yes.
happened to be his 58th 300 passing yard game of his career or something like that. He's one of the all-time great passers. And with him back in the lineup, I mean, you guys saw it with the Lions for years. Injured players or not, you got Matthew Stafford in the game, you're going to have a good passing output. And so the Rams may be a little bit more real than the world gave them credit for throughout this offseason. They had some really young players catch the ball really well, but in terms of the Seahawks, they're just a very oddly unhealthy team at this point. And so, yeah, it was disappointing. It was, the whole world has been expecting DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kenneth Walker, Geno Smith. They're all going to be on the field at the same time, including me. How do you deal with that? And in reality, Jackson Smith and Jigba comes off a broken wrist. He had surgery for a broken wrist. His whole hand was wrapped up still in a cast. I didn't realize that that was going to be the situation. When I saw him on the sideline on the broadcast and his whole hand was still in a full-on cast, I was like, well, he's a wide receiver. That's okay for
Right.
linemen to do sometimes or whatever, but how does a wide receiver catch a pass with his hand wrapped up like that? And he still made a couple plays, but Seattle loses two their rookie left tackles from last year. They lose them both by the third quarter. Tyler Lockett got hurt for a little bit. It just seemed like whatever Seattle had going on was was destined to fail at some point. So it was just a really odd game, and it was disappointing. And I still, there's always overreactions in week one.
Oh, yes.
Pete Carroll has always been a coach that gets a team to peak at the end. Seattle is always a team that in the first 6 to 7 weeks, you're like, I don't know, man. And then somehow they get better at the end. So their defense is concerning right now, especially with the health issues over there too. But I'm concerned for the Seahawks going to Detroit this week.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the memes already throughout the week. I believe Mina Kimes actually was talking about it too. Seattle without their like you were saying, their two defensive guys, and there's a picture of Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, yeah. I've got it down on my notepad right here. You wanted to know keys to the game. Aiden Hutchinson's got like fireworks and stuff blowing up around him on my paper.
Yeah, so that's gonna be it's gonna definitely be a wake-up call to Seattle's defensive line. So in fact, to where you might need some of Seattle's best to watch this game if you're out there at 10 a.m. on the West Coast. That's another thing too, is that West Coast, I'll have you talk about that a little bit as well. West Coast teams coming to the East Coast and playing at 10 a.m. their time. It's definitely a body clock shift per se.
Yeah, what's kind of strange is that Seattle has this reputation for their home field advantage, which, I have no problem with that. It's very real. And during the Legion of Boom years, it was nearly impossible to go to Lumen Field, no matter who you were, and win a game. In recent memory, like in the last 3 or 4 years, Seattle historically is actually a better road team. They actually do better flying to the East Coast and playing over on that side of the country than at home, which is kind of a bizarre situation to think about when you think about the home stadium that they have that's designed to be loud and designed to be a hard place to play, and their reputation for home field advantage. So I'll be interested to see it. I don't know if it's just because they get away from home and they get away from distractions and it's all business ahead, that they do better. But historically, in recent memory, they do. So I actually feel a little more comfort that they're playing this game on the road than they would be playing in Seattle.
But also the thing is, Ford Field is going to be loud and proud, and
Oh, absolutely. I like I said, we'll get to scores later. I'm not predicting Seattle to win this game. Like I said earlier, I have a very hard time picking any team to go to a home opener and win it. Like to go on the road to a home opener and win it. Let alone when you have a team that hasn't had this kind of support and hype for, the last my whole life. I'm
let's
I'm
say
so
probably our
excited to see
lifetimes.
what the Lions crowd is going to look like, the excitement that's going to be. It's going to give off the vibes that the Jets fans gave off this week, and hopefully it doesn't end that way that it did for the Jets. But I'm excited to see the broadcast because I want to see the crowd. I want to see the Lions. One pride they call it, right?
Yep, that's the hashtag one pride. It's gonna be crazy down at Ford Field. So of course, moving to the game preview, we can go to keys to the game. For like you had said, first off, you got Aiden Hutchinson and a lot of stars by it because that man I've been very lucky to watch him as a Michigan fan too. Aiden Hutchinson has not only done his job, but he has been just a stud in his entire career so far. Tell me about it from an outside perspective.
Yeah, so Aiden Hutchinson is the biggest reason that I fear for Seattle in this game because their left tackle and their right tackle are both still injured. It's 10 a.m. over here on the West Coast, so we're gonna wait for another injury report from Seattle, but it's not looking great for Lucas. Charles Cross is obviously still dealing with some stuff, and Seattle's kind of still just getting into the swing of things. Whenever you have this kind of star power on offense, it takes a little bit of time to mesh it all together, So Jackson Smith-Njigba, while a rookie, is a very electric player. We saw that at Ohio State. Dude went for like 300 receiving yards in a Rose Bowl, something like that, something crazy. So I think they're still gelling that together. But Aiden Hutchinson is my biggest concern because Seattle, the last couple of years, the offensive line has not been impressive. And now you remove two tackles where Aiden Hutchinson is going to be attacking from. He was a beast against the Chiefs. Like, he was an absolute terror against the Chiefs. He'll throw two spins on you in one play and get around you, make you look like a fool on film. So, little concerned about that. I know that the Lions got some O-line stuff going on a little bit too. I think Decker's got something going on.
Yeah.
But and Seattle's also going to be adding some pieces into that defense. It looks like Devin Witherspoon is going to play, so there'll be another rookie out there on the defense for Seattle. So I think this game really could be won in the trenches. And if that's the case, I'm going to have to side with the Lions.
There you go. So I just pulled up an injury report so far for week 2 for Detroit. Taylor Decker with an ankle injury did not practice yesterday. Khalil Dorsey with an illness did not practice. Emmanuel Mosley with a knee and hamstring did not practice. But Frank Ragnow was a full practice on Wednesday. No reports yet as far as Thursday goes. But I would probably expect Ragnow to play. But the other three, I have my doubts. So that goes for that. So yes, Hutchinson. I mean, without Seattle's two defensive guys there on the left side, it's easy to say that Hutchinson could have a field day, but it's next man up, and that's what the Chiefs did, of course, with Travis Kelce being gone. And they almost beat Detroit. So just because it's one, there's something out there that's saying, hey, this guy is gonna ball today, doesn't necessarily mean that, because like we had said, this is the NFL. So any given Sunday could happen. So
and Seattle does still have an offense, right? That's very capable of getting the ball out fast. If Jackson Smith-Njigba is a little healthier this week, DK Metcalf did have the touchdown last week, but at the end of the game, he got really frustrated, shoved a player down the back. That wasn't a cool moment for anybody. Tyler Lockett didn't essentially play in the third quarter at all, as he was dealing with some sort of, he sat down for a little bit, got up and came back into the game. But if you're looking at Seattle, how do you beat the Lions? How do you beat Aiden Hutchinson? I think one, get the ball out fast, get those receivers in space instead of trying to take so many deep shots. And then last week, Seattle, one, couldn't get off the field defensively on third down, but couldn't convert on third down offensively, taking a lot of deep shots. And Ken Walker, I think the big key for me, if Seattle wants to win this game, is keep the ball in Ken Walker's hands. I think last week he had 8 carries in the first half. Seattle was moving the ball offensively, and then he only touched the ball 4 times in the second half. And Seattle's offense completely stalled. And Ken Walker had some big moments against the Lions last year. So I think Ken Walker is the big guy. I guess the big question for me is it going to be 48-45 again? I don't think so.
No, I think Detroit's defense is going to be a little bit better than that, because honestly, despite Detroit's defense finishing still in the bottom 12 of the NFL last year, you got to just take out weeks 1 through 4. You got to look at after the bye, because I'm sure, and you probably watched that game too, before Seattle's game when Detroit played Dallas in week 6. That defense came to play. Now, of course, Detroit did not win that game against the Dallas Cowboys, but you could see then, after Dan Campbell fired the special teams coordinator at the bye week, that defense was going to be there to play. And I think that this year, so far, it started definitely different, as they held Kansas City, which is a team that's notorious for scoring in the 30s and the 40s, to 20. So I don't necessarily see a 48-45 game. And if not, Yeah, some crazy things are going to have to happen. But yes, that what's scary about Seattle's offense, and you've said it a couple times now, is that they do have, and thankfully we've maybe Kelly in Vegas can't say his name, but we can say his name, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'm sure you've seen some of Kelly in Vegas, which Kelly in Vegas is a friend of mine. Her Seattle preview. I'm not going to even pronounce his last name. Well, we've done it a few times. So Jackson Smith and Jigba, or Smith and Jigba. There you go, KIV. So that's but in all seriousness, it's scary that they have that wide receiver tandem. DK Metcalf, who's always prone for a long touchdown. Tyler Lockett, which if you're a fantasy owner, you love to see him have long touchdowns, especially if you draft him in DraftKings. Now he was hurt in the third quarter, but you've got that three wide receiver tandem that Geno Smith can pick from. And that's going to present a tough day for Detroit's secondary. Now, Detroit's secondary did all right against Kansas City, but also Patrick Mahomes found a zillion different receivers. So maybe that could be the name of the game is, can Geno Smith find receivers in the double digits rather than just Lockett, Metcalf, and Smith and Najibba?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be. You look back and see that Seattle had an off day. Is Seattle going to have two off days in a row with that wide receiver tandem? I don't think so. Especially with the leadership of Bobby Wagner back. Bobby Wagner provides a different sense of move on to the next game. He has so much experience with, such a great iconic defense in the Legion of Boom with Seattle. And, he's there for 10 years, went and played for the Rams for a year and came back. But Seattle's also going to get a little bit of I think, a morale jolt. I think that this is the perfect week that Jamal Adams returns to practice. He's not going to play in the game, I don't imagine at all, because he's coming off that quad injury in week 1 last year, a game that I covered, by the way, the Seahawks Broncos game. Jamal Adams tears his quad like just a couple plays into the game, it felt like. And he missed an entire year, but he's back on the practice field as of yesterday. So I think Seattle will get a little bit of a personal morale jolt there. And like I said, Devin Witherspoon coming back from injury, the rookie that they've been really looking forward to. So Seattle, I think, will bounce back. Pete Carroll's been really good at getting Seattle to bounce back. The concern for me is the offensive line. Does Geno even have time to go find those receivers? Because Seattle likes to take the deep shot. And the other thing that concerns me for Seattle is over on the defensive side of the ball. Seattle has always been, under Pete Carroll, a bend don't break style defense. And this is something that really plagued them last week, giving up 8-9 yards of play on the pass, right cutting right through the middle. And so that bend don't break style defense worked for the Legion of Boom because they could really scrunch down the field once you got inside the 20, and they had such talented playmakers in each zone of the field. Each guy could get their hand on the ball. They don't necessarily have that anymore. They have a lot of rookie and sophomore DBs. Reek Woolen obviously is one that stands out, but if you're the Lions, you have to look at that bend don't break style defense and think, let's not go for the big play. Let's just chunk them 10 yards at a time until we find ourselves down inside the 20, and then take advantage of the opportunities when we get there.
There you go. Last question before our score predictions. Thoughts on Seattle signing Jason Peters?
I don't have many. I mean, I'm to the point with this Seahawks team that I'm in a spot where I know that this is going to be really, really weird for a little bit. Like, it's going to depend on, and it's a cool thing. I mean, he's a veteran guy. I'm not saying, who cares? I'm just to the point now where Seattle has, some really important veteran leaders on the team as they stand. And I'm comfortable with the fact that this is going to be a strange year. Jamal Adams not going to get back in there for a little while. Obviously, the tackles health situation is going to be a little bit of a thing for a little while. And then as you go down a schedule in the NFL, other players are going to get banged up at some point. No team makes it to week 18 healthy. So, or 100% healthy, that is, So I'm very comfortable with this team's going to look kind of strange at the beginning. I don't think we're going to get a true sense of who the Seahawks actually are until they go through that gauntlet of the schedule that they go through at the end, where they play like 3 games in 11 days or something like that. So it will be wild, but Pete Carroll makes some peak at the end. And so, the reporter in me tells me just wait until it gets to the end. And then the fan in me tells me, okay, I've seen Pete start with a rocky ship at first and then make it sail at the end.
So it makes me think of a twisted Ron Burgundy quote: "The Seattle Seahawks."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And well, you see, the thing that's kind of problematic or troublesome for Seattle in that sense is that they have the San Francisco 49ers in their division. So they don't really have time to figure themselves out, right? They have to, I mean, San Francisco last week looked like a juggernaut that we all expected them to be. So Seattle doesn't really have time to find themselves. They got to go do it right now, and they've already given up a divisional game. But, you know, history repeats itself, and history says that Pete Carroll will get his team to peak at the end.
There you have it. So, well, how do you think this game is going to go come 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon your time?
Well, I have a hard time picking. I would have a really hard time picking Seattle as much as I want them to win, and I'll be rooting for them to win. I'm not going to go on record saying that they're going to win against a Detroit Lions team in their home opener, especially with how last week went for both teams. So I'm going to say the Lions are going to win it. It's going to be another close one because, like you said, Seattle really tends to perform over there in Detroit, and I don't think that Seattle is going to have as bad of a day as they had against the Rams twice in a row. But it is going to be close, but I'm going to say the Lions are going to win it. I think probably 31-23.
31-23. You've got Detroit winning. I think Detroit is going to win as well. Now, last week, if you may or may not have listened to my Lions 53-man roster preview, I was saying that this team was going to start 0-2 because of, like you had said, history. Because Seattle had Detroit's number ever since the LOB. Well, this is different now that they've beaten the Chiefs. That crowd is going to be loud. It's going to be proud. I don't necessarily expect for it to be a beatdown because Seattle, like we had said, has got the 3 wide receiver core, a bend don't break defense. So I'm going to say Detroit 27, Seattle 13. I think they're going to hold Seattle lows. It's going to be a little bit lower scoring than perhaps the over might suggest, but it's going to be something like maybe even Seattle will have a 10-7 lead at the half, kind of like if you maybe think back to the Lions' first Monday night game in umpteen years back in 2010, I think it was, where Chicago actually had a 14-10 lead at half, I believe, and then Detroit just ran the table on them in the second half. And that's what I think is going to happen this time, is that first half will be competitive. Maybe Seattle holds a 10-7 lead at the half, and then Detroit runs away 27-13, I think is going to be your final score. Detroit wins this game. So with that said,
Don't kill me, everybody in the Pacific Northwest that listens. And I predicted the Seahawks to lose this game. It's a business first mentality.
exactly. And if you still want to listen to the Sunday night reports with Cameron Derby, I would suggest you not go after him if Detroit happens to beat Seattle, because Eugene needs their sports reports from Mr. Cameron Derby. That's for sure.
Appreciate that.
You bet. So moving to our pick'ems. Again, this is I do this every football week. Now knowledge of each team is not completely necessary. Just give me your picks and any analysis you got. First, we got a battle, perhaps a Mike Leach tribute, LSU and Mississippi State, as it's at the Bulldogs' first game at home since Mike Leach's passing.
Yeah. First of all, we have a lot of history with Mike Leach over on this side of the country because he spent so much time with Washington State. So there's a lot of people in our newsroom that are Washington State alums that were just devastated when Mike passed away. So it's cool to see him get the kind of tributes. He's always just the funniest. One thing you can always count Mike, you can count on with Mike Leach is just a funny soundbite whenever you needed it. Like it just I think my favorite thing I ever heard from him was the wedding advice. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's just one of the
you can
I'll
tell
go show my
reaction
friends
I
that
have.
all the time to this day. What
First
kind of
of all, it's
invitations
too
do we
late.
want? I don't care. Yeah. He says you should have asked me a long time ago for advice about this. No,
Yes.
Mike Leach, a good dude. I'm happy that he's getting the tribute he's gonna get. I don't think that his team is gonna win this game. Mississippi State struggled with Jayden DeLora Arizona last week. Jaden Delora not necessarily throwing the ball, but his mobility. And Jaden Delora, very talented guy. He'll have those days, and then the next week he'll have a game that makes you go, "Gosh, what is going on?" But anyways, they're running a little tougher, but LSU got momentum back after it looked like the world was probably ready to hit the panic button after Florida
Yes.
State, but
Oh, yeah.
LSU got a little momentum back. And I think that that's the key here. While they didn't play a tough team in any sense of the word, they got their confidence back, I think, last week. And that's why I'm going to take LSU in this game.
Yeah, Hart wants to go Mississippi State because of the tributes and whatnot, but Head wants to go LSU because, well, one, I'm friends with Megan Making Money as well, Barstool Sports, so she'll probably want to come on the show and say something if I don't pick LSU. Give me LSU by a field goal. It's going to be it, but it's going to be dramatic, and there will probably not be a dry eye in that stadium. We're thinking about Mike Leach and his impact on not only Mississippi State, but of course Texas Tech as well as Wazoo. So moving from Megan Making Money to Kelly and Vegas's team, K-State and Mizzou, rolling with the Barstool theme here. Not intended anyway. It just came out to be this way. K-State, Mizzou.
Kansas State defense wins championships, right? I think they've only allowed 38 yards per game on the ground. I want to say, don't quote me on that stat. It's something along those lines. They're like 5th in the nation for tackles for loss. And they have a good scoring defense too. And then you look at Will Howard, it's tied for the most points responsible for in the entire country, I think, to this point. So Kansas State has been on an offensive roll too. They've been scoring 40 points. It feels like every 40 or more. It feels like every time I talk about Kansas State, I'm talking about they scored 40 points last week. I think dating back to last regular season, 4 or 5 games straight, I think that they've scored over 40. Give me Kansas State. I think there's just too much firepower there.
Yeah, Kansas State, I think reigning big don't quote me on this, but Big 12 champs, I think, at least Kansas State. Yeah, give me Kansas State in this game by 2 scores. Mizzou just hasn't impressed me at all so far this season. Big Ten ACC challenge, but on the gridiron, not the hardwood. Minnesota UNC.
We got 2 fighting ideologies here, right? I mean, Drake May, and that speed, and then is the Gophers going to try and just slow this thing down as much as they possibly can and just keep UNC from getting into any sort of offensive rhythm? The problem with that is that Minnesota struggled really hard to run the ball against Nebraska. So that stands out on paper as like that's a big problem when you're struggling to run against some teams that have been very poor in the last 20 years. How are you going to do it against a really good team? And UNC, excuse me, they're kind of confusing too because they look like a defensive juggernaut in the first game of the year. And then they flip around and they go to overtime with Appalachian State. They give up like 219 yards on the ground, something like that. It's around 220. And like I said, it had to go to overtime. But if there was going to be a week to upset North Carolina, I think it was going to be last week, and the opportunity was missed. Give me UNC this week.
There you go. So, yeah, Minnesota, you like you had said, 2 fighting ideologies. Minnesota slow the ball down, but when you don't have Mo Ibrahim, that kind of messes with your running game there. So yeah, give me UNC here. I think that you scored a lot of points and kind of like Loyola Marymount back in the 90s where they just scored and scored and scored and scored and scored. Can UNC play some defense? And on this type of against the Minnesota team that has struggled offensively, I would say yes, give me UNC. So
it doesn't feel like the week for upsets, does it?
No, not
the
necessarily.
slate this week is kind of bland.
Definitely. So last one on the college slate, Tennessee and Florida.
All right, Tennessee and Florida. This is where things could get a little interesting, right? Because Florida, as bad as the world has kind of made it out that Florida looked against Utah at Rice-Eccles, I don't think they looked as bad as the world gave them credit for. I think 270 yards allowed to Utah. Graham Mertz is like 75% completion at this, or I got stumbled up in my words. He's complete like 75% of his passes this year. If the ball comes out of the guy's arms, someone catches it. And so this is going to be not at Rice Eccles, right? This is going to be in the swamp. This is going to be in a completely different environment. Tennessee, great defense so far this year. They lead the nation in sacks and tackles for loss. I think they can get in the backfield and really rough you up. That being said, Austin P is not Florida. There's a difference between the two programs. There's a difference between the two environments. And while Joe Milton has played, is also completing a high percentage for Tennessee, if there's going to be an upset this week, I think it's going to happen in the swamp. Give me the Gators.
There you go.